We're taking a little road trip for the rest of this program tonight, a trip to one of the most beautiful places in the world, the Grand Canyon, along with somebody who knows it as well as maybe anyone alive. Michael Guillieri is he had an amazing life as a world traveler. He is the great-grandson of a 49er. He served in the U.S. Army as a sergeant during the Vietnam era, earned a Ph.D. in ecology in 1979, then did some pioneering research with wild chimpanzees in Uganda. He studied primate behavior and ecology all over the world, in Kenya, the Turks and Caicos, in Queensland, Vancouver, and since 1974 has run more than 660 commercial whitewater trips and treks in Ethiopia, in Kenya, New Guinea, Peru, Rwanda, all over the world, including 140-plus two-week rowing and paddling trips through the Grand Canyon, covering some 43,000 miles of river overall. The Grand Canyon, of course, is one of the natural wonders of the world. It draws about 5 million visitors a year. Some of those people don't come back, and mostly it's from their own stupidity, as told in Michael's book, Over the Edge, Death in the Grand Canyon, some gripping stories about crazy things that people have done at the canyon. Michael, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you give me sort of a broad overview of the hold that the Grand Canyon has on people? I imagine you know it as well as anyone. I suspect that maybe the totality of it is unknowable because it's so vast and it changes. But talk about sort of how people react when they go there, and if somebody in our audience has not been there, why they should go.
You know, the actual hold, the allure of Grand Canyon has changed over the decades. And I think early on, and I don't mean the 19th century, I mean in the 1960s, let's say, people went to Grand Canyon because they were aware that it was one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. It was America's most famous park. Certainly Yellowstone and Yosemite are really well known, but the most bizarre landscape in North America is the Grand Canyon. And it was something you had to see. Well, now it's something you had to see. I think it's more on social media, like, you can brag about it on Facebook. You have to have it on your bucket list and so on. So I think the reason that some people go is much more trivial than it used to be. But it's virtually, even people who drive or fly or make their way to Grand Canyon somehow and stand there on the rim at South Rim Village and look over and go, wow, it's a big hole, really are not aware of what they're seeing in terms of the absolute magnitude. And one way I like to express that, I guess, would be while you're looking on the other side, and the farthest it goes is 20 miles before the other rim, and it averages about 10 miles across. And when you're standing on the rim with, the hordes of tourists, you can see maybe 10 miles across and 10 miles of length. And the idea that it's actually 277 miles long is it's impossible to conceive or even visualize when you're staring at it. So as people learn, gosh, it's a lot bigger than what we see right now, and it looks really big, what we can see. It's a slow dawning of that whole idea that a thing is gigantic. 1,000 cubic miles of missing rock in there.
You've been all over the world, seen some of the most beautiful places. Does it still grab you?
It still grabs me. It grabs me in different ways because, like anything else, if you have a certain history that's positive or negative in a certain part, for me now, every section of the canyon from Lee's Ferry at the very beginning at mile 0 to the other end, every section has some sort of personal connotation, some of which is great and some of which is less than great because certain things have happened there or because the wind always blows upstream or whatever. And I have really strong personal feelings about the canyon still, but they've evolved over time due to, I've actually spent 7 full years of my life in that canyon on trips. And 7 years is a long time. And so a lot of events can happen in those 7 years. And so for some reason, around every bend of the river, there's, I don't necessarily remember each event, but they have an emotional connotation in that location, like, oh yeah, I got to get past this spot, or
Yeah.
wow, we should just stop here.
I can relate to that. I know after living in Las Vegas and being a news guy for so long that you drive down any street and you remember there was a murder there, a car accident, a body was found, a bombing, something like that. I can relate. These trips that you've taken, 2 weeks at a time, how many people on a trip, and how to describe those?
The trips these days that we take are 15 days long, and trips that I do are rowing trips. There are other ways to do it. There are motor trips with really large boats that hold 16 or more clients, and there are paddle boat trips that one or two companies do that have 6 people on a boat and they're all paddling, which sounds fun until the wind blows upstream. And it always, every trip it's going to blow upstream. Not all the time, but. And we do rowing trips with 4 people on a boat that's 18 feet long. They're inflatable boats. We also run dories, which are kind of a knockoff the Portuguese fishing boats that are used by small-time fishermen off the coast of Portugal that were sort of reborn in on some rivers in Oregon, and then discovered there and thought, well, these would be perfect for Grand Canyon. And so they were very elaborate, beautiful boats. They're not perfect. They look perfect, but they certainly don't act perfect. But anyway, those trips take 4 people per boat, and you go for 2 weeks. And the trip is really transformative for most clients. I would say about 2/3 of them do not really know what to expect, even though they've read literature and maybe even books, and are shocked. Many have never slept outside, never slept in a tent, never camped. It's just kind of a bucket list thing. You have to go. And they're usually blown away by how fantastic the trip is beyond their expectations. Even though, for $5,000, you should have reasonably big expectations. And I would say one of the things that's most impressive to most people is you can't help, and even for us guides who've been there many times, you can't help gaining or regaining a perspective about how brief our lives are relative to the age of, say, the canyon, and that if you're going to do anything with your life, you better get going and do it now, because compared to the geological display there, it took so long, so many years to create. Our lives are like, the blink of an eye, geologically speaking. So get your rear in gear. That's one of the common revelations of people in the canyon. The other part is that it's really possible to be happy without a phone, without a computer, without a refrigerator, and on and on and on and on. I
guess the other lesson is about how, the idea that it's also driven home how fragile life is, how short life is, because so many people have died there. It's, as a percentage of the visitors, it's very small, but you remind us early in this book that, look, people come here and do really stupid things and die. And you are not focusing on the macabre aspects of this just for their own sake, but also as a warning to people. Look, if you're going to come here, be prepared, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really easy to underestimate that which we don't know, and it's even more so if someone we do know has done, a hike, a trip, just even a visit to the rim and gotten an amazing photograph posing on the rim. And, if someone tells you, well, there's nothing to it, you'll love it, then, and if you have that mindset, there's nothing to it, there can be a brutal and very short wake-up moment. And people make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's just in Grand Canyon, frequently a really minor mistake or a chain of minor mistakes has major, major consequences.
Well, you mentioned as well early in the book, I think in the foreword, about the 911 mentality, the idea that people are going there. It's a national park. They equate it with like Disneyland. Well, if I get in trouble, somebody will come and get me.
Right. Well, in fact, we just, my wife and I are in search and rescue, been for many years now, and there was just one of the most recent missions right here in this area where a couple of hikers who hiked too far and hit the panic button, and they actually got phone reception, called the sheriff's department. The Coconino County Sheriff's Department also has jurisdiction within Grand Canyon because most of the canyon is in our county, as well as most of it being in the park as well. But anyway, the attitude that was displayed is becoming much more common, which is as soon as the rescuers got to them on foot, they demanded a helicopter because they didn't want to walk back out because they were tired. And the whole it cracks me up. It cracks everybody up because it's like, where do you think the helicopters are going to come from? You know, where do we have one parked in the back of the parking lot just waiting for somebody to get tired? And that is a kind of a new development based on the ease of communication. And one of the mistakes that's really common these days in the canyon and near it and in this general area here, and probably around the wilderness areas around Las Vegas, is the only piece of equipment you need to take with you is your cell phone. And everything will flow from a phone call. And unfortunately, that's the way things are going now.
Well, the cell phone plays into it in another way, and the tendency for people to do stupid things to take selfies. And I think probably selfies weren't as prominent when you started writing the first edition of this book, but I'm certain that they're causing problems now.
Yeah, it's even more. It's a cliche, I guess. You know, take one more step backwards. And I actually had a man on a trip who did that to his wife accidentally, not on purpose, because we all thought, oh, you murdered your wife. But he said, "Well, take one more step." He was a very dominant German guy, and his dutiful wife did everything he said. She took a step back, went off a cliff. And so that cliche, all that for a photograph, either posing or taking the photograph, people have literally gone off the edge, south rim, with the camera to their eye, stepping around on the rim, trying to get the exact perfect perspective in the viewfinder, and poof, they're gone. And of course, it even happens more often with people posing, you know, being asked to pose or posing on their own or begging to have their picture taken, and they're looking for the most dramatic spot, and it's just a little too dramatic and they're gone. So, yeah, that happens. It doesn't happen quite. It's happened probably a dozen times, but it has not happened hundreds of times, which is what a lot of people might expect, that, you know, people are dropping like flies. It's actually not as awful in terms of sheer magnitude as one would expect, but it still does happen. And even that it happened once is kind of mind-boggling, but it does happen.
You the first chapter in the book is about people who fall off the rim, and you mention that it's one of the first things visitors ask of a ranger or a guide. Hey, how often does it happen? And you have to answer that.
Yeah, it is a crack up, because once anyone looks off the rim, and then they look around at the other people, and there's no guardrail, and they look around at everybody again and see what they're doing, and they look off the edge and go, oh my God, you know, it's thousands of feet down. The first question that pops into most people's head is, you know, there's got to be some kind of fatality rate here, you know, because you won't survive. If you make a wrong step, you're not going to survive. So that is the question: how many people die here? And I think that's the title of the chapter. But oddly enough, there are certain years have gone by when nobody's gone off the rim accidentally, and there are other years, and you don't know why this is the case, when there's been 6, 7, 8 independent, nothing to do with one another, but they've gone off in a rash of stupid mistakes. And these are not suicides. These are all accidental. So it's very hard to predict why this happens or what will happen next year. You know, it might be 7 next year. It might be 0 next year. hard to understand.
The book starts off, or that chapter starts off with a story about, it asks, say, how many people fall here, and it's a warning. Get her off that wall before she falls off. It's a Hollywood actress, I guess, who's on the wall.
Yes, yeah, Dee Dee. I was Dee Dee. She was a fashion designer for Hollywood and designed a pair of pants with the legs short and called them pedal pushers. And this was the big debut, the opening moment for pedal pushers, and he was standing on the wall. And it's exactly as you said. Get her up. The two rangers showed up, and the senior one said to the junior one, "Get her off that wall before she falls." And the junior one didn't even get 2 steps, and she'd already fallen. And it's a really nice opening to the book because Tom and I, when we were writing it, I was of the opinion there have been so many fatalities here, and some of them are so interesting that it's going to make a really heavy-duty book. Can we afford the time in the book to list near misses? And it turned out that Dee Dee Johnson, who fell off the wall in her pedal pushers, actually survived. She went halfway down the slope and was rocks. The ranger actually wrote a report here and said that, gravel was falling out of her crotch into the void, spinning into the air for several seconds before it hit. And they managed to get to her before she slid all the way off the edge. And she ropes back up, and then the lurid part of things was she's roped back up and her halter top was now missing, and she was really mad about it. But she was alive. And that was kind of a nice way to start the book, that it's not all going to be dismal. But frequently, rescues are impossible because things happen too fast, and it's thin air.
Well, it's a long way down. I think you wrote in the book that it's comparable to surviving being struck by lightning twice. If you fall off the edge, chances are pretty good you're going to die.
Yeah, there have been very few. There have been a few, but only a very few that have fallen in exactly the right place, hit a slope and rattle around and then bang into a tree and get all bruised and beat up and broken in a few places, but still alive. And those are lucky.
Michael, you mentioned somewhere in the book, I'm trying to remember where, but people will show up, visitors to the Grand Canyon, and they'll remark, gosh, why aren't there guardrails all around this canyon, as if that's achievable or desirable?
Yeah, it makes sense from if you've never been there and you've never seen it, and it's a highly theoretical question like, well, there's a big drop. People go and look at it. Maybe there should be a guardrail. And unfortunately, there are a bunch of reasons why a guardrail would be an interesting challenge. One of them is that there are probably 6 governmental jurisdictions that would have to get together to build a guardrail, and they'd all have to agree. The other is that it's about 1,600 miles of rim, almost 1,700 miles of rim, that would require a guardrail that would be, more than halfway across the United States length of guardrail. And the next one is that most people fall not because there is no guardrail, but because they've gone through the guardrail to the other side so they can be on the very edge. So even a guardrail would not stop people. It would be kind of a symbolic thing if it existed. So there's all these reasons why guardrails are not possible everywhere. And I think the original concept behind you don't need guardrails is people are too smart to fall off. And that was the original ruling concept. And it's been proven that that's not perfectly true. But guardrails are virtually impossible. So,
well, you don't really want to have guardrails there. I mean, it changes the experience, doesn't it? The aesthetics.
Some of them, there are a few places where there's a perfect view of the canyon and the rim itself juts out in kind of a little peninsula, like a natural version of the skywalk. And those get so much action that the park has placed guardrails in a few of those places simply because they get crowded, because the view is so good from that little spot, and the little spot is little, and there can be a lot of people there all at once. Guardrails are a really good idea to just keep the jostling down. But as I said before, one of the amazing parts of all this is when it comes to fatal accidents is people have frequently stepped through or climbed over the guardrail in order to, I don't know why, because it's only 3 more feet usually, but they have to have that 3 more feet behind them instead of in front of them, and that's how a lot of these falls happen. A lot of falls happen with people doing that and then sitting on the rim, with their feet dangling hundreds of feet above anything else down there, and then get up and lose their balance because when you're visually oriented to most of your walking and movement, and you suddenly get up and there's nothing close, there's nothing but empty air, a huge void down there. A lot of people don't orient themselves in such a way to stay erect, and poof, they're gone. But anyway, guardrails would not stop any of that.
Well, we can't afford to keep the park open, so we're not going to be funding any guardrails, I don't think, anytime soon. There's a story you tell early in the book, in the first chapter, about people falling. It mentions sort of an example of what not to do, and mixing alcohol with the rim of the canyon is not a good idea. The guy's name is Greg Gingrich, 1992. You remember that story?
Yeah, he was. There was
goofing
alcohol
off
involved, but I don't think it was like a record-setting amount. But what he was doing is goofing off, and this is one of Tom and I, my co-author on this book, and Tom, I have to introduce him a little bit. He's not here right now, but he was the Rim Clinic, the South Rim Grand Canyon Clinic doctor for about 9 years before we started working on this book and doing the research. And he'd seen a bunch of different kinds of accidents and the results from those. And so that's how I convinced him it was a good idea to write this book. But one of the things we haven't figured out is why some people so clearly understand the danger that various different dangers, including the fall off the rim danger, while others seem to think that it's not really dangerous. It's, I don't know what they think. That's what we haven't figured out. But in this particular case, the guy was walking with his daughter, and she was like a young teenager in age, and they were with friends, and they were walking back to get together at the parking lot, and they were walking parallel along the trail with the rock wall, and those rock walls are only 2 to 3, some of them are barely 2 feet high. So he was trying to goof off with his daughter, and he jumped on the wall, and she was in this "oh dad" mood, like you're always goofing off, and just jumping on the wall didn't impress her enough. So he waved his arms in a big windmill and went, "Oh, I'm falling!" And immediately on the downside of the wall, the canyon side of the wall, there was a slope. It wasn't a perfect drop off. So he pretended like he was falling and went off the slope, and she just didn't. She thought he was so goofy that she didn't want to encourage him to do anything more, so she didn't pay any attention to him and kept going. And several minutes later, she met everybody in the parking lot, and he hadn't shown up. And then he hadn't shown up later, and then later yet. And so they hit the panic button, told the Rangers. Helicopter flew over, and he was 400 feet below. He had slipped, apparently, as soon as he hit the slope, pretending that he was falling. His pretense turned into the real deal. And that story is not, unfortunately, it's not unique. There have been other people who've goofed off in similar ways, and poof, they're gone. And it's one of the things I cannot explain. I've sort of racked my brain thinking, what is the mindset that, dropping 500 feet of thin air before the next little rock is not dangerous? I mean, I can't fathom it.
You tell a story about a guy, I guess he's a transient, named James Merriman, who wanted to gather up coins. People toss good luck coins over onto a ledge or something, and this guy.
Yeah, he was a funny guy. I actually knew some of the people who knew him. Some of these, many of the episodes in this book, we only have the information from various official sources or newspaper or whatever. And other episodes, we know most of the people involved, and there's a different character when you're writing about something you know about more. But anyway, this guy was a strange animal because he kind of was not quite homeless, but he lived in a homeless kind of way. He would ride his bicycle from Flagstaff to Grand Canyon and hang out. He had a cave that he lived in there, and he would stay for weeks at a time. He'd gather up all the coins that he could get from these, and that's another thing. I don't know why people throw coins into the canyon, but he knew right where they did it, and he would hang out gathering coins, and then sometimes when he was gathering coins, people would come and egg him on and throw coins, almost like feeding breadcrumbs to the ducks. But when normally this worked out for him, and he'd have this big, heavy sack of coins at the end of a few weeks, and he'd go back to Flagstaff and take everybody he knew out to dinner. Then he'd drive back, he'd ride his bike, again, 80 miles back to the canyon and do it all over again. In this particular case, people were urging him, or at least marveling at him as he was gathering coins in a pretty precarious area. And he just uttered those fateful last words, "Hey, watch this." And he took a jump to get to another ledge and missed it.
Oh, well, that's a long way down to think about your mistake.
Yeah, and that's, unfortunately, if you've taken physics back in high school and you realize it's 32 feet for the first, 16 feet for the first second, 32 for the next, and so on, you can start figuring out, gee, you have time to almost start the preamble to the Constitution before you hit. And it's certainly plenty of time to think, well, that was stupid.
You know, it occurs to me that you've got a whole chapter on murders, but it occurs to me that it would be hard to tell the difference. The husband's goofing off on the edge, and the wife is behind him and gives him a little shove.
Yeah, that issue has come up, and probably for very good reason. There have been a couple of dubious, unwitnessed, quote-unquote unwitnessed falls where somebody stood, the surviving spouse stood to make a little money out of the event, but no one was there to contradict the story, or no one was there to even have seen anything. So it has been said that inside the canyon is the scene for the perfect crime. The rim itself, it may not be as much scene of perfect crime because there are people around. Of course, again, there's hundreds of miles of rim, so there may be sections with no people around. But anyway, that has happened. There's some dubious events that had to be labeled accidental because there was no concrete evidence. It just was fishy.
I should mention, I was talking about the wife pushing the husband off. It's more likely the men who are going to die because of stupid things that men do, right?
Yeah, when we added up every conceivable accident in the canyon, it's 75% men. And ironically, women who died because men did stupid things while the woman was with the man. So women are just naturally more cautious. Well, unfortunately, that's an easy topic because almost nothing you can think of that causes major problems in the world that weren't instigated by men instead of women. And that category of accidents within Grand Canyon falls into that same arena of, hey, Bubba, watch this. But we're saying also that once you are below the rim, it is a different world. And actually, all these crazy falls off the rim are the least interesting types of mishaps that occur in the canyon. Because when you drop off the rim on a trail or a route, and there are many, many, many trails and routes. Routes are usually much more hair-raising, but most of the accidents happen on trails as opposed to routes. But there's a whole different constellation of events and dangers or things to watch out for, including again falling, because there's no superhighway into the canyon. It's all on foot and it's all exposed. But as the park rangers originally figured out, most people are so smart, they stay away from the edge. So most of the inner canyon falls don't happen on the trails. They happen
when people go off the trail.
Yeah, really odd. I want to take my picture here, or I'm really odd circumstances where the mentality apparently is similar to the rim problems, that we're in a park and therefore parks are nice and you don't get hurt in parks. But the other things that kick in that are dangerous are environmental. It just gets so hot in the canyon. If it's 112 degrees in Phoenix, it's also 112 degrees at the bottom of Grand Canyon. In fact, I think the bottom of the Grand Canyon is hotter than Las Vegas, generally speaking. And my son, who's also a guide, just did a trip 2 years ago where it got to 122 during the trip. And he said they couldn't do anything except stand in the water. And that was their whole activity for the entire trip, was standing in the water. Anyway, there's a whole bevy of dangers, going off trail, getting lost, underestimating heat, underestimating how much water, underestimating how far things are, and on and on and on. They all lead to different sorts of combinations. And then the classic was people have braved all that and done quite well, and it's hotter than hell, and they get to the bottom and jump in the river, and the river carries them away. They're gone forever. So that whole spectrum of different ways to make a mistake starts yawning widely once you're off the rim. And
a lot of stories in the book about people who are in great shape. They're athletes. They can handle it. They're going to run up the trail and run down the trail and show off and show everybody how tough they are. And they really make terrible errors in judgment.
Yeah, there's a unfortunate classic example. Her name was Margaret Bradley, and this happened just a few years back, but she was an avid runner, ran competitively. She was also a medical school student, very bright, and she was so dedicated to running. She ran marathons, she ran short races, and so on. She would run one race in New York, get on an airplane, run another one in Chicago the next day, that kind of thing. But she had a buddy, or not that she knew very well, in Flagstaff, but she came out to Flagstaff, and he suggested they do a run in Grand Canyon. And this was the classic story where he thought it was, without even looking at a map, without going on the internet, without doing anything, he picked a rarely used route during the middle of summer that he thought was about 15 miles. It was actually about 29. And they went for a late morning run, 29 miles in the canyon in the summer. It's a long, complicated story, but she only brought 2 liters of water. She probably would have needed 8. I would say 8 minimum, a couple gallons minimum. And because she did not understand where she was going, she was just counting on him. And he had brought 4, and he crashed. And he didn't die, he crashed. And she went to run for help, and she eventually died of dehydration trying to get help for him. He waited till dark, and he made his way out with somebody else who rescued him when he hit the main trail. So that sort of thing is not unusual. There are several people who died doing the exact same route, the exact same time of year.